What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. The Hoenn region. This is not only a vast land filled with great environments and water, but it's also got one of my favorite Pokédexes of any Pokemon region. And before I looked into it, I was worried that this might be hard because of all the single-typed Pokemon in the Hoenn roster, but then I realized, oh yeah, there are plenty of Pokemon from Gen 3 that could pull off having triple types. I'm sure there will be options that I don't pick that you would think are perfect in your mind, so let me know in the comments, but there may even be some that I do pick that you won't agree with, such as number 6, Tropius. Like I said, you might disagree, but this Pokemon is a great addition to the region, and you'll always feel accomplished when you finally find one, and even more so once you actually manage to capture one. It's a fantastic design, as a sizable dinosaur that you could ride made of grass, which would be cool enough on its own, but then they added wings. Anyone else order a flying Brontosaurus? Because obviously with wings that big, you're going to need to add the flying type. And that's kind of a double-edged sword, because when you put grass with flying, it makes Tropius weak to fire, poison, rock, flying, and quad weak to ice, and it resists water, fighting, quad resists grass, and is immune to ground. So the weak spots do slightly outweigh the strengths, but this massive single-stage Pokemon can handle it. So what could the actual third type be here? Some people might lean towards Dragon, and I could see that given its demeanor, and even some of the moves that it has had over the years, so I wouldn't begrudge that if that were your choice. But I think I'll go with Ground instead. My rationale here is the brown coloring being some type of soil rather than wood, since there is no grain to speak of, but Tropius also has been gaining ground-type moves more and more every year, so I think it fits. Plus, it's just funny to add ground to an already flying type, so taking all of the traits of the ground type and adding it to Tropius, we see the water, poison, rock, and grass weaknesses all cancel out. This just leaves it with resistances to grass and fighting, and immunities to electric and ground. Nice, and that only leaves weaknesses to fire, flying, and... oh, I knew it would happen eventually. Here we have our first ×8 weakness to ice. Even with 2 immunities, that's gonna be a problem. At that point, hail would probably act like stealth rocks. Just be sure to keep Tropius in the summertime if you want it to stay alive. Number 5. Ninjask. Nincada created a pretty cool unique combination with bug and ground, so it was weird when it evolved into a more standard bug and flying type. Well, in addition to Shedinja, there's nothing standard about that. And Ninjask does have the bonus feature of being one of the fastest Pokemon alive, so that's something. But its typing really is not the best, since bug and flying makes it weak to fire, ice, electric, flying, and quad weak to rock, while it resists bug, quad resists fighting and grass, and is immune to ground. So, what does this thing need as a third type? Well, given its name and the inspirations for the entire evolutionary line, I'm leaning towards the dark type. I mean, ninjas are pretty morally sketchy, operating in the shadows, plus remember that super popular ninja starter that was dark as well? So it works for me. And when we take all of the attributes from Dark and put them on Ninjask, we see that it results in weaknesses to Fire, Ice, Flying, Electric, Fairy, and Quad weak to Rock, with resistances to Dark, Ghost, Regular resist to Fighting, Quad resist Grass, with immunities to Ground and Psychic. Honestly, only getting 1 extra weakness from Dark doesn't seem like a big price to pay when the others cancel out and you get 3 more resists. Not that too many people would have been using Dark or Psychic types against you anyway for fear of your speedy bug moves, but you might as well make it the fastest Pokemon of 3 different types just to secure that dominance. I could maybe even see keeping the ground type onto Shedinja as well, but I won't press for that. Number 4. Altaria. The cute little Swablu is an unassuming novelty that you might dismiss for being repetitive, even if a cloud bird is a great idea. However, when it evolved into a dragon, it caught everybody off guard. While it may not look like a traditional dragon, Altaria is definitely a worthy addition to your team, even if it can get overshadowed a bit in the wealth of great options in Hoenn. Dragon and Flying makes Altaria weak to Dragon, Fairy, Rock, and Quad weak to Ice, and it resists Water, Fire, Bug, Fighting, Quad resists Grass, and is immune to Ground. That's pretty good, especially with good stats behind it. But what exactly could we have here? Well, it may be unoriginal, but I truly do think the Fairy type would have been a great addition once it rolled around. This is aside from the Mega Evolution, which all but confirms it, as it switches to a Dragon and Fairy type, but I think this would have been the case anyway. It's a light and fluffy creature that has a nurturing side, and it's got a bunch of Fairy-type moves added to its pool as soon as that became a thing. So I think the Fairy-type weaknesses of Poison and Steel, with the resists of Dark, Fighting, Bug, and the Dragon immunity, would be good for Altaria. Mostly because that means the Dragon weakness is totally gone, but all of the other 6 weaknesses remain, including the Quad Ice one, and it leaves resists to Water, Dark, Fire, Quad resist Grass, Bug, and Fighting, and is immune to Ground and Dragon. So I think that those are some decent trades for getting so many strong resistances, not to mention the stab power that would boost the Fairy-type moves that Altaria already has. Number 3. Soulrock and Lunatone. Pokémon pairs can go many ways, but to this day, Soulrock and Lunatone are 2 of the most iconic for many reasons. Obviously, they held down a gym all on their own, and their space theme is not only interesting, but it's perfectly expressed in their typing of Rock and Psychic. These spatial bodies fell to Earth long ago, allowing us to use them against our own terrestrial fighters. But it might be harder than we anticipated, because while this combination does resist Fire, Flying, Normal, Poison, and Psychic itself, it does have weaknesses to Water, Ghost, Grass, Dark, Bug, Ground, and Steel. So the downsides are kind of heavy, but it is worth noting that both of these extrasensory meteorites have the Levitate ability, so that actually does take care of one of their many flaws. But what about adding a 3rd type to the mix? Well, as similar as these 2 Pokémon are, they do also have some pretty substantial differences. Like, for instance, Soulrock is obviously related to our closest star, and as such gains a variety of Fire-type moves. Seriously, like a lot of Fire moves. So we can take the Fire-type characteristics and add them to Soulrock, and we see that it would make it weak to Rock, Ghost, Dark, and Quad weak to Water and Ground. But again, it actually is immune to Ground most of the time. So this leaves resistances to Normal, Flying, Poison, Fairy, Psychic, Ice, and Quad resists Fire, with the rest canceling out. So that actually worked out much better than I expected. But what about Lunatone? While its buddy turned up the heat, our natural satellite here cooled things down by leaning into the ice a bit more. Not nearly as much as Soulrock was tied to Fire, but enough to stand out, and it would create a great dynamic between the 2. Unfortunately, Ice has notoriously bad stats because its only resist is to itself, and it has 4 weaknesses. So applying it to Lunatone gets you weaknesses to Water, Dark, Ghost, Grass, Rock, Bug, Ground, Fighting, and Quad weak to Steel, while only resisting Ice, Normal, Poison, and Psychic. Yeah, that's not nearly as useful. But at least the stab moves that it would gain would be able to counter some of those types to avoid too many threats. But I do think adding extra flair to these outer space rocks would make sense and give them even more to love. Number 2. The Fossils. When Johto skipped over resurrecting Pokémon, we didn't think anything of it. But once Hoenn brought it back, so many possibilities opened up. And the chosen inspirations here are pretty good to provide variety compared to the previous forms, by giving us a bug type and a grass type to combine with the obvious rock. So the thing about these Pokémon is that according to their dex entries, they both live in the water. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they're different from the Gen 1 fossils, but it also kind of doesn't make sense for those ones to have water as an attribute and for these not to. I mean, Cradily is literally the barnacle Pokémon, so sounds like water to me. So firstly, Armaldo as a bug and rock type is pretty unconcerned about most matchups, since it's only weak to water, steel, and rock itself, while resisting poison and normal, so it's mostly neutral to everything. But if we put that together with its water type, we can trade out two of the weaknesses, seeing rock with grass and electric instead, by adding resist to fire and ice along with normal and poison. So that actually works out in his favor, and would help to boost all of the water attacks that it uses already. As for Cradilly, the unique grass and rock combination makes it still weak to bug, ice, fighting, and steel, while it resists electric and normal. That's it? Well, luckily water can cancel out some of those, making it weak to bug and fighting, and interestingly grass again, but it now resists normal, fire, and water. So I'm honestly surprised that it helps both of these prehistoric Pokemon so much, only adding resistances and trading out some of the weaknesses. And truthfully, Cradilly could probably be a poison type too, given some of its descriptions, but we'll save 4 types for another video. Number 1. Flygon. Well, this is another one that was pretty obvious when starting this series. Probably no other Pokemon from Hoenn comes to mind more when thinking about altered typings than the gorgeous yet powerful Flygon. This is not only one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, but it was a great choice for your team in Gen 3, with Vibrava probably being the easiest dragon type to obtain in the game. And Ground and Dragon is an amazing type pairing that's only weak to Fairy, Dragon, and quad weak to Ice, but it resists rock, fire, poison, and is immune to electric. But like before, Flygon also has the Levitate ability, so technically is immune to ground as well. But its abundant power is perfectly highlighted by its fabulous design, and as good as that is, this is where things started to confuse people a bit. The general design and even the name of this Pokemon do sort of imply the bug type to most people, and I totally get it. Now, some folks out there say that it should get the flying type too, as it does soar through the air, and I guess they use the fly part of the name as well for that, but as we said, Levitate takes care of that. So I would say the bug type is more apt, especially since that influence starts from the very beginning stage of the line. So bug is not as underwhelming as you might think, being weak to rock, fire, and flying, and it resists grass, ground, and fighting. So combined with Flygon's current typing, we see that some cancel out, only adding a flying weakness to the Fairy, Dragon, and Quad Ice, while keeping resistances to grass, poison, and fighting, and keeping an immunity to electric. And of course, the ground immunity with Levitate should be considered as well, so while this might not make up for the crippling ice weakness, the extra flying could easily be countered by one of the many rock moves that Flygon can use, or any other coverage really, and it would easily make Flygon one of the most impressive bug types to ever exist. Some people think that it already is, so why not go all out? So, those are the Pokemon that most deserve to have triple types from the Hoenn region. It worked out pretty well on them for the most part, however there are clearly many more that could make the cut. So, which Hoenn Pokemon would you make triple typed? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!